A very good morning to everyone who's joined today's session. My name is Matapelo Tipe, and I am going to do a presentation on hybrid teaching and learning. Just a few checks on my side. If you are watching today's session and you are able to hear me, please just indicate on the chat box that I am audible before we carry on. Right, I have had an indication that I am quite audible. And as I indicated, my name is Matapelo Tipe, and I am going to be your facilitator today. And we'll be focusing on the topic hybrid teaching and learning. Just as I've introduced myself, I think it's only proper that you too get an opportunity to do so. And how we're going to do that? You are going to follow the link in the chat box, and you are going to basically share an image of yourself. And what you're also going to do is you're going to share it with us what it is that you are hoping to learn from joining this afternoon session. And as you do that, I will carry on with the session, and then we'll come back in a minute to view what everyone is here to learn today. Some occupational health and safety guidelines, particularly for the participants who have joined us on a face-to-face basis. We have noted that some participants have got medical conditions, and we have on board a medical team that is more than capable to assist with some of the medical conditions that have been indicated. We also should we experience power failure, we do have a battery backup in the training venue, which only kicks in after 10 minutes of power failure. And in the event that this power failure causes a fire, please be on the lookout for our fire marshals, who will then direct us on how to move from here. Before we carry on, the first task was that people would then introduce themselves, just as I have done so on my end. I am now going to move on to the little Padlet that I shared, so that we see if anybody has had an opportunity to add their introductions. Okay, from the back end, I can see that nobody has had the opportunity to do so. So what I'll do is I'll carry on with the presentation and allow you perhaps a few more minutes to carry on with your introductions, and we will move on this end. Some virtual training rules for those who are joining us on a virtual instance. Please make sure that you use the chat box for any communication that you may have, so that I'll see and be able to interact with you. Also, do note that it's important to always keep your microphones on mute. We don't have any interruptions as I share today's lesson. Also note that the lesson is being recorded, so that we all have an instance of the recorded version. So in the event that you were not able to join in the face-to-face session, or in the event that you can't join the live session, you'll also have access to the recorded version of the session. Also make sure that to save some bandwidth on your side, turn your video off at all times, unless of course you are giving feedback, or you are doing a introduction and you would like us to see your face. Otherwise, just turn it off. It will save you a bit of bandwidth, and you'll experience a better quality of the presentation. Right, we are now going to be looking at what are the learning objectives for this day's training, and basically what we'll be doing today is we'll be going through what is hybrid teaching and learning. What is this method? Because we've seen from time to time people talking about it. Where does it come from? What is it? And is it possible for us to implement in our current position? We'll also take a few minutes to talk through methods that one can use to keep learners engaged whilst the teacher is implementing a hybrid teaching method. We'll also explore learning platforms that are available for hybrid teaching and learning, and then lastly we'll look at things to consider before implementing the hybrid method. I am going to take a moment and see if anybody has had a chance to sort of introduce themselves within the Padlet. I see from the back end once again that people have not had the opportunity to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link again of the Padlet. And as you join the training session, please take a moment and share with us. Okay, someone has indicated that there is no Padlet link, and I've been pasting it in the chat box. This can only mean that it has not gone through. So what I'll do is I'll share it once again. I'll share it once again for people to just take a moment and share with us what are you hoping to learn through attending this session. Also just share a bit about yourself so we get to know each other. I think I've had the opportunity to share who I am, and it's only right and kosher for me to know who it is that's joined the day's training session. So, what is hybrid learning? So when we talk about hybrid learning, we're talking about an education model that integrates different types of teaching. So we're talking about mixing an online teaching method and which is also an online teaching method, also a face-to-face teaching method. But having both of them integrate in such a way that learning is continuous and there's no break. So where you are doing the face-to-face teaching, it links very well with the virtual teaching. And in instances where you are teaching on a face-to-face platform, you are also utilizing some of the tools that you are using in a virtual instance. And learning carries on as if it's face-to-face throughout, or if it's virtual throughout, and there is no break within how you do the teaching, right? So it also has a consideration for synchronous and asynchronous learning. So you do have the opportunity of learners joining the teaching all at a time in a live setting. So it could be in a virtual instance, or at a time where you have set some time for a face-to-face instance, or it can also include a option of asynchronous learning, where students join in at a particular time if you've scheduled it, and those who are not able to attend at that particular scheduled time, they are then able to join an instance of possibly the recorded version. So it's quite accommodating in its nature. So like I indicated, where it's synchronous, it's learners joining in at a particular time of learning, and they do so all at the same time, or in some instances the time is set where the training session happens potentially at 3:15 p.m. but learners join in at their time. So independent learners who have got other activities that they are completing at that particular time where we set the time can join in at a later time. So there isn't a restriction really in terms of when this learning happens. So when we speak about hybrid learning, it encompasses the face-to-face element of the learning, There's also an inclusion of virtual learning. There's a consideration of synchronous learning where learners join in the learning at the same time, be it a virtual instance or a face-to-face instance. And there's an element of asynchronous learning where learners are more independent and are able to join in the learning at their time or at their leisure. What's nice about this hybrid model is that it's quite personalized, so there is no limitation in terms of when the learning happens. What's important is that the learning actually happens. What's also very nice is that it's relevant. I think this speaks to us now and our COVID experience where, during lockdown, learners didn't really have some learning that was planned to take place. But what we experienced is that teachers shared different models of learning, and learners took part in those instances of learning in their allocated time. So it's relevant in a sense that the learner has got control on when the learning happens and how it happens, and they have the option to choose how they're going to learn. What's also very nice about this model is that it allows for engagement. You would have seen that in a virtual instance, the engagement will be through the utilization of digital tools and resources, like I've just shared a Padlet with you, and learners are able to engage. And in the instance that learners have joined the lesson in a face-to-face instance, then they are able to possibly engage with each other in groups or in a classroom where questions are asked openly and learners are then able to engage. And whilst we implement this hybrid learning method, it's important that we recognize some elements around having breaks within the learning. So I've noted here that in some instances, it's especially if it's a virtual session, it is important that you segment your work as a facilitator to at least 15 minutes, so that learners are able to focus on the learning, and that the teaching is direct, so you don't have to sort of think about everything that's within the textbook, but you segment the work and select key focus areas, and then that becomes what you focus on within the learning, with a consideration obviously for having a break to actually keep the attention span. You also have allowed the opportunity for learners to reflect on the learning, to ask them questions, give them the opportunity to respond to the questions that you've asked. Also give them the opportunity for them to share some insights, because in as much as they're learning, it's not like they're learning from a blank slate. So it's important that they also share their experiences and their insights. So the chat box in a virtual space becomes the key place where you allow for this interaction to happen. And in a face-to-face instance, obviously, you're also allowed to share a link so that learners do the sharing and the reflection in groups as well. You also have the opportunity, like I was saying, to allow students to work in groups, and in a virtual instance you keep the same pattern of having groups but in different work groups. So you split the class into a one class and create little pockets of groups within a virtual space. And what's lovely is that there are quite a number of platforms that are available for us to do that, and I think we'll have a brief look at that later on. What we can also look at is the importance of using the chat functionality, especially in a virtual class, to hold these discussions, and I think what's more important as an overall is the element of remembering to take breaks in between, because sometimes sharing a lot of information at the same time can be quite overwhelming, and where you have a consideration for brain breaks, then we realize that the learning is actually effective. What are the type of instruments or teaching platforms that we can use for hybrid learning in a school environment in particular? I've indicated 2 in this space, but I know that there are various others. I'm thinking now the Zoom platform is also a platform that could be utilized for this. But in this instance, I've included the Google Classrooms, which is there is a free version for public schools, and what it is really is it's a web-based collaboration platform. And what's really nice about the platform is that it's available even as an application to be used on a mobile device. And basically, it's a virtual learning space. We see the same engagements happening on Microsoft Teams. There's also a free version for public schools that's available, and it's also a communication and collaboration platform which was formerly known for business, and I think in its initial instances it was used as a business platform, but over the time we've seen how the Microsoft team have considered including some elements that the education space needs. So we're looking at things like class notebooks that can be incorporated within the Microsoft Teams space to make engagement and learning effective. What's also nice is that it's a virtual collaboration space. You can also get a virtual instance of the platform. So these are some of the platforms that could be quite useful when you consider a hybrid teaching environment. Some of the considerations when you are actually looking to go to use or to implement hybrid learning in a classroom, the first of your consideration will be around the technology. What's nice about the platforms that we've spoken about is they are quite compatible with a lot of smartphones. So where learners have got different devices in from home, they are able to engage, but where they are not able to connect because perhaps learners don't have the technology, then you consider how you can infuse this learning type of model within a face-to-face teaching environment, whilst others are obviously joining in a virtual instance. What you need to consider also is that this model is quite new to us in the education space in terms of implementation. So we need to consider supporting our learners emotionally. And this speaks to where a learner is struggling to connect perhaps, and they're quite frustrated because they feel that perhaps something is wrong with them. So being there as an educator to support the learners is quite key in order to see a successful implementation for hybrid teaching. What we also need to consider with this method is the element around electives. So as you plan your lesson, you need to consider how learners will engage and have a variety of ways that learners can engage, so that learners can select the type of engagement that they want to be involved in. So in some instances, we know that learners are good in written form. There you can request your learners to use things like the blog to reflect. But in some instances, learners are not great with written, but they're very good with perhaps verbal reflection. In that instance, you're able to use platforms like the Flipgrid and allow them to elect the type of learning that they want to engage in. So in essence, everything is centered around the student when you're planning to use this method. And lastly, what you're looking at is a consideration for bandwidth. And I think what's key and lovely about this method is that in the event that the learner is not able to join the live session, they have the option, because of perhaps internet connectivity, they have an option of not joining at that particular time of the lesson, but where they could possibly go to a clinic that's close by that has got open internet, and then they can download a recorded instance of the lesson, and when they have time go back and listen to the lesson and be able to engage then at an environment that allows them, and when they have access to connectivity. So in essence, everything is centered around the learner and being able to support the learner at their point of need. I think a lot of us have spoken about equity versus equality and how you need to balance this. But I think this is one learning method that allows equity to take place, because you are considering all your learners and you are potentially meeting them at their point of need in order for things to balance with all your learners. Right. I think for this afternoon session, we'll end the session here. But what I've included within the actual learning is some references of how I gathered this information to put together the presentation. What I would also like to do is I'll share a link as part of the presentation package. We've included links for you to interact with us. And one of the activities that's there is for you to watch a video that's just 2 minutes. And within that video, we would like you to take a few moments. It's a video on hybrid learning, and at the end of the video, there's some key essential skills that are learned through this model of learning. And your task then is for you to look at the video and share with us some of the key essential skills that you are able to learn through this hybrid module, or rather model. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Please make sure that you follow the information package that we shared with you as part of the meeting invite, and make sure that you complete all the tasks that are part of that information package. The information package will be the same presentation that I've gone through. All you have to do is just follow the links and make sure that you complete the links that are included within the presentation. I see that we have some people who have managed to share some images, and I'd like to really go through them quickly so that we know exactly who it is that has joined us this afternoon, and we just share the lovely faces that have been able to join us, and perhaps also look through if we were able to touch on some of the learnings that the participants were actually hoping to learn. So from the screen, I can see that we have a lovely lady called Uzodumo, and she says she's here to learn new ways of teaching and learning. And Zodumo, I think we have touched a bit on the hybrid learning method, and we're hoping that you've learned a bit from there. We also have Upindile Mavunda, who is excited to finally get to understand what hybrid learning is. I hope that with this short presentation you were able to learn a bit. We also have Ms. Quintress, who says she would like to have a better understanding about blended hybrid learning and to successfully incorporate it within her classroom. I hope that you will do. And right here at the bottom, I think I had shared an example of what I needed done as part of an activity. Oh, we have a few anonymous learners. We've got Brenda, who didn't include an image of herself, but it's Brenda, aka Queen B. I can't wait to learn more about today's course. We also have Ukoni Tlaka, who works for SchoolNet and is hoping to learn and understand more about today's training session. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me this afternoon. It was lovely. It was a lovely session for you to join. Hopefully it was a lovely session for me to present, and I'm hoping that moving forward you'll be able to incorporate the hybrid teaching and learning method within your classroom preparations. If you do have any questions, my email address is indicated on screen. You can contact me anytime if you have questions about what we are meant to be completing as part of the activities in this session. Hoping that you will have a lovely day. Thank you once again for joining us. Goodbye.